A top-decked card is a card that you draw when you have 0 cards in your hand that hopefully turns around the duel. A top 5 list is a video where we count down 5 things that meet the category that's in the title. And a top deck is a deck that is very competitive and has seen tournament success. So with all of that said, I'm going to do the top 5 top decks from top Yu-Gi-Oh decks, and we're going to discuss some crazy cards that you can top deck in some of the top Yu-Gi-Oh decks of all time. So let's start it off. At number 5, we have Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. This is without a doubt one of the best top decks in current Yu-Gi-Oh! This card can absolutely just rip apart fields. Even without the destruction effect, the Book of Eclipse, everything, this card can attack every single monster your opponent controls, and that's pretty good. It's not quite like a Regeki or a Dark Hole, but in terms of thematic top decks, Ultimate Conductor Tyranno is something you definitely don't want your opponent to see. What makes Ultimate Conductor Tyranno so interesting is that the rest of the Dinosaur deck really doesn't have a lot of good top decks. Soul Eating Oviraptor is good. It's not as good with Miscellaneousaurus at 1 now in terms of top decking, but you don't want to draw like Baby Ceresaurus, you don't want to draw a Dragonic Diagram. Most of the cards in the Dinosaur arsenal actually revolve around you having other cards in your hand to make your bigger combos. So what separates Ultimate Conductor Tyranno from the rest of the deck is that it's sort of like a 1-card summon as long as you have the 2 dinosaurs in graveyard, which, spoiler alert, dinosaurs usually have those 2 dinosaurs. And this is like the biggest thing you don't want your opponent to draw, because if you get dinosaurs down to 1 card, you can be pretty certain that you're going to win the game as long as they don't top deck this, which is why it's at number 5. Number 4 is a card that I just talked about in the video, but I feel like I have to mention it here as well, albeit for different reasons. So Shaddoll Fusion is a card that you really don't want your opponent top decking, assuming that you have an extra deck monster. Now I'm going to say that because most decks are going to have an extra deck monster on the field for pretty much every turn, especially if you've put a Shaddoll player down to 0 cards. Now I talked about Shaddoll Fusion on my top 5 most annoying Yu-Gi-Oh cards to play against, and this is part of the reason. So you set up a board, you get rid of your opponent's board, you end with a couple extra deck monsters, and you're thinking, okay, my opponent has activated 2 Shaddoll Fusions already, and now they're both in the graveyard. What can they possibly top deck to out this situation? And then lo and behold, they draw Shaddoll Fusion. Now, why is Shaddoll Fusion so good, or why was it so good? Well, it was so good because you could activate Shaddoll Fusion. That would send like Shaddoll Skomata or Shaddoll Beast, and then a light monster, and then they would summon El Shaddoll Constructs. So not only are you getting the Shaddoll effect that you sent for the fusion, not only are you getting the light monster effect, you are also getting the construct effect to send another Shaddoll monster. So this could immediately gain them a ton more advantage. If they sent Beast, they're drawing a card. If they sent Hedgehog, they're searching a card. If they sent Dragon, they're destroying a card. So if they sent Falco, they're reviving a card and building up a defense, which makes Shaddoll Fusion extremely frustrating to play against. But I think it's most frustrating when your opponent draws it as a top deck, because you've done everything you can to completely get rid of all of their cards, and then they draw their sort of 1 card out to your entire board, which was pretty frustrating during the time that El Shaddoll Construct was legal. This one is one that you might not be thinking about very much anymore, unless you're playing against FAs, but that is Zodiac Barrage. For pretty much the entire time that Zodiac Trident and Zodiac Broad Bowl were allowed to be played in the TCG, Zodiac Barrage was one of the most ridiculous top decks. When it first came out, top decking Zodiac Barrage could instantly win you the game by summoning a Rapier from the deck and summoning multiple rank 4s, not only ending on Trident or Broad Bowl, but also like a Daigusto Emerald to gain you another draw, and that was pretty frustrating. But one of the hardest things as we went on to Zoo format is that no matter how many times Zoo got hit on the ban list, if we're even talking about current Yu-Gi-Oh!, Barrage is still legal. It's still at 3 copies per deck, so it kind of follows the same landscape or the same idea that Shaddoll Fusion has, where if you draw it, you can instantly gain a ton of advantage. Now, I will say that right now, compared to into Shaddoll Fusion, this card isn't that scary of a top deck. One Zodiac Barrage can't do a ton. I mean, even Shaddoll Fusion right now can do some pretty nutty stuff in Dinosaurs. You can send Shaddoll Beast and then like the Overtext card to summon Winda, add Pill to your hand. That's pretty good. But Barrage, you don't have to worry about anymore. But for a really long time, top decking Barrage won a whole bunch of Zodiac Mirrors, because if you didn't have a Zodiac Dryden out, because let's say your opponent outed your Barrage, you basically set your whole hand, maybe ended with a hand trap, hopefully ended with a hand trap, but then you're just really crossing your fingers hoping your opponent does not top deck their Zodiac Barrage so that it can come back around to your turn and you can stabilize and win from there. But if they drew the Barrage, you were in a pretty rough spot, and they knew that, and a lot of people won games off of that top deck Barrage, summon Rat Pier, special summon a whole bunch of cards from their extra deck, and even in some cases OTK by using Whiptail or Zodiac Tiger Mortar. Now number 2 is going to take us back to 2015, early 2015 when Necross came out. Preparation of Rites was one of the most ridiculous cards in the Necross deck, and I can't decide which is worse. So when Necross first came out, Preparation of Rites was at 3 copies per deck, and when a card is at 3 copies per deck, what ends up happening is you can basically assume your opponent's always going to have it in their hand. You pretty much just are going to assume that Necross always has Preparation of Rites. It's at 3 copies per deck. It's not hard to draw. The deck has a lot of deck thinning, so you just assume that you have to play around that card. However, when that card went to 1 at limited, you don't really play around it anymore. There's no reason really to play around a 1-of, and there's not really a great way to play around Preparation of Rites. It just won them some games. But I think the most frustrating part of playing against Necross was when you finally got them down to almost no cards. They like don't have enough cards in the graveyard to banish the ritual spells. They don't have a hand. They don't have a field. And then they finally get down to nothing. And then they draw a prep, and you're like, okay, now I just lose. Because in that case, if you got them down to nothing, you probably weren't playing around like Necross of Trishula, and now they can just summon it, and it's ridiculous. And yeah, Preparation of Rites was the cause for a lot of headaches back in 2015. And I know that it just came back to 3 on the most recent ban list, and people are excited about that, and it probably won't make any impact on the metagame, but I'm not looking forward to playing against that card if Shrit ever comes back. I really don't want to play against Preparation of Rites anymore. That was one of the most frustrating cards from 2015, and I was glad when it was limited, and I was glad when Necross were gone for the game, so I don't have to worry about people top-decking Prep to win the game. And now Pre-Preparation of Rites exists, that's true, but there aren't as many decks that can take advantage of Pre-Preparation of Rites in the same way that Necross could take advantage of regular Preparation of Rites. So Preparation of Rites, super annoying, it's super good to top deck in Necross, making an already overpowered deck even better. The number 1 spot is going to go to one of the most versatile cards that's ever been printed, and that is Tour Guide from the Underworld. Now that might surprise you, but Tour Guide has seen a ton of play over the years, pretty much since it was released, or at least a couple months after it was released. As soon as Exceed monsters were entered into the game, Tour Guide has been a mainstay in competitive formats. So if we look at when it first came out, top decking Tour Guide was super frustrating to play against when your opponent was playing Dino Rabbit, because they would almost always have a Rescue Rabbit banished, and if you top deck Tour Guide, you can make Liverless Sea Dragon, and then bring back the Rescue Rabbit to go into a Logia. That play might not seem that broken right now. I mean, maybe to some people it seems good, but it's not really that overpowered. But back in the day, back in 2012 or whatever, 2011, that play was incredibly good, especially coming off the top. There weren't nearly as many sort of pieces of effect negation to actually stop that from happening. And then if your opponent let the Levier sit around for another turn, you can then use his effect again to summon the same Rescue Rabbit and potentially go off a second time, which was pretty stupid. But even beyond that, this card just repeatedly came up as a sacky top deck. If we think of it in windups, you could top deck Tour Guide and summon a wind up carry Zenmaity, rip Zenmaity. It's on the Forbidden Limitless at the time making this video, but that was a super sacky top deck, especially if you had a wind up factory sitting on the board. But we can also look at it in the context of Burning Abyss when it came back to 3 copies per deck. That was pretty stupid. Yes, you could search it with Scarm, but a lot of the times you could bait the one they search with Scarm, and then they would just have another one in their hand, and that was super annoying. And then finally, when it goes to 1 copy per deck, but people are still playing Burning Abyss, it is still without a doubt the best 1-card starter, because the entire Burning Abyss deck pretty much is designed on 2-card and 3-card combos. You usually have to have 2 Burning Abyss monsters to do anything worthwhile, or you have to have like a Fiendish Rhino Warrior and then a Burning Abyss monster, or like Foolish Burial and a Burning Abyss monster. But Tour Guide is like the best 1-card starter, and it is still played in that deck, and they don't always search it with Skarm, but sometimes you'll get them down to nothing, and then they'll draw a Tour Guide, and you'll be like, man, isn't this card at 1? That seems absolutely ridiculous. It's even worse if they're playing a 60-card Grass variant of Burning Abyss with 1 Tour Guide, and they manage to top deck it. That's pretty stupid. But anyway, that is pretty much going to wrap up my top 5 top decks from Yu-Gi-Oh! Top Decks. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what cards you're salty about playing against. Now, I did just want to cover sort of archetype cards in this video, just cards that stay on theme. I know there's a ton of sacky spells to top deck, like Soul Charge or Monster Reborn, Change of Heart, Regeki, all of those ones, but I just wanted to talk about the themed cards that a lot of decks that have topped events actually top deck to win a ton of different games. And yes, I'm so sick of saying the word top deck, so I will end the video here. I'll see you guys later. Bye.